Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 241st New Social Environment. I'm Emily Dean, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a radical poetry reading curated by Barry Schwabsky. We are also thrilled to have the poets Simone Kearney, Arthur Z, Joyelle McSweeney, and Tyrone Williams here with us today. To begin, I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation, the traditional owners of Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters on which we stand. Finally, the Brooklyn Rail stands in solidarity with the uprisings in response to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Nina Pop, David McAdie, James Scurlock, Jamel Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, Rhea Milton, Dominique Remy Fells, Toyin Salau, Walter Wallace Jr., and countless others we have lost to white supremacy and police violence in this country, and acknowledge that justice will come from the streets, from the nation demanding accountability and refusing to move on until Black Lives Matter in the eyes of the state. Before I introduce our curator, we'd like to begin with a brief moment of silence. Thank you. And now to introduce today's curator. Barry Schwabsky is an art critic for The Nation and co-editor of international reviews for Artforum. His recent books include The Perpetual Guest, Art in the Unfinished Present from Verso 2016, Heretics of Language, Black Square Editions 2017, Landscape Painting Now, D.A.P 2019, and The Observer Effect on Contemporary Painting, Sternberg Press 2020. Forthcoming are a monograph on the British painter Gillian Carnegie and a collection of poetry, A Feeling of And. Barry, take it away.
Thanks very much, Emily, and thanks to the Rail for having us here as part of this ongoing series, and especially thank you to my esteemed comrades who have come here to read along with me. They all have long and impeccable credentials, which I'm not going to go through, although you can, I think, see them on the online bios. I will say that Simone is joining us from Brooklyn, and she has a new book coming out now, or maybe about to come out, from Belladonna, and it's called Days. Arthur, whose last book, Sightlines, received the National Book Award for Poetry, has forthcoming this April his book, The Glass Constellation, New and Collected Poems, and that's from Copper Canyon Press, and he's joining us from New Mexico. Joyelle is the publisher of, or co-publisher of, Action Books, and her recent books are The Necropastoral and Toxicon and Arachne, and she's joining us from Indiana. And finally, Tyrone Williams. His most recent book of poetry was As Is, from Omnidawn, and he also co-edited an anthology of critical essays inciting poetics, which was published in 2019. And he joins us from Cincinnati, and I'm Barry Schwabsky. Well, as I think probably most people who are watching and listening know, we lost a great light yesterday, which was Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who died at the age of 101, and I'd like to dedicate this reading to him. And so I want to start out with reading from him, and first poem in a book that began to nourish me at a very young age, at Coney Island of the Mind. In Goya's greatest scenes, we seem to see the people of the world exactly at the moment when they first attained the title of suffering humanity. They writhe upon the page in a veritable rage of adversity, heaped up, groaning with babies and bayonets under cement skies in an abstract landscape of blasted trees, bent statues, bats' wings and beaks, slippery gibbets, cadavers and carnivorous cocks, and all the final hollering monsters of the imagination of disaster. They are so bloody real, it is as if they really existed, and they do. Only the landscape has changed. They still are ranged along the roads, plagued by legionnaires, false windmills, and demented roosters. They are the same people, only further from home, on freeways 50 lanes wide, on a concrete continent spaced with bland billboards, illustrating imbecile illusions of happiness. The scene shows fewer tumbrils, but more strung out citizens in painted cars, and they have strange license plates and engines that devour America. And as you may know, Ferlinghetti, aside from being a poet, was a great publisher of City Light books and also a translator. And I wanted to bring him in that guise as well. And I thought I'd read two poems from a book that he co-translated, which is the Roman Poems of Pasolini. I work all day like a monk, and at night wander about like an alley cat looking for love. I'll propose to the church that I be made a saint. In fact, I respond to mystification with mildness. I watch the lynch mob as through a camera eye. With the calm courage of a scientist, I watch myself being massacred. I seem to feel hate, and yet I write verses full of painstaking love. I study treachery as a fatal phenomenon, almost as if I were not its object. I pity the young fascists and the old ones, whom I consider forms of the most horrible evil. I oppose only with the violence of reason. Passive as a bird that sees all in flight and carries in its heart, rising in the sky, an unforgiving conscience. And then one more from Ferlinghetti's translation of Pasolini, The Resistance and Its Light. Thus I came to the days of the resistance without knowing anything except style. It was a style all of light, memorable consciousness of sun. It could never fade even for an instant, even as Europe trembled on the deadliest of eves. We escaped with our household goods in a cart from Casarsa to a village lost among canals and vineyards, and it was pure light. My brother left on a mute March morning in a clandestine train, his pistol in a book, and it was pure light. He lived long in the mountains, which shone almost paradisical in the blue gloom of the Friulian plain, and it was pure light. In the attic of the farmhouse, my mother always watched those mountains hopelessly, already aware of fate, and it was pure light. With a few peasants around, I lived the glorious life, persecuted by atrocious edicts, and it was pure light. Come the day of death and freedom, the martyred world recognized itself anew in the light. That light was the hope for justice. I didn't know which justice. All light is equal to all other light. Then it changed. The light became uncertain dawn, a growing dawn, spreading over Friulian fields and canals. It illumined the struggling workers. The rising dawn was thus a light beyond the eternity of style. In history, justice was consciousness of a humane division of wealth, and hope took on new light. So, we've been asked to think specifically today about poetry and politics, and it's something I've been thinking about in great puzzlement for many decades. I think one of the great questions for the politics of poetry is the question of what is the relationship of the poet to the collective, if you want to call it that, the multitude. And a poet who's not usually thought of as a political poet who thought about that a lot was Stéphane Mallarmé. And I can put in a plug here to say that currently at Cesar magazine, I have an essay on Mallarmé with translations of 3 of his poems, but there's another poem that I wasn't able to finish my translation of in time to put it with those, and I'm still working on. But it gives one kind of answer, not the answer by any means, but one answer to the question of the poet and the collective. And so here's a work in progress of that translation. It's the Tomb of Edgar Poe. See how eternity at last transforms him into nothing but himself. The poet stings with unsheathed blade a terrified century, unaware that in this strange voice, death wins through. They who in the voice of an angel giving purer sense to the words of their tribe once heard nothing but the vile twitching of a hydra, shouted down the drunken spell as dishonorable overflow of some dark concoction. With earth and high heaven at war, what woe, if our idea can carve no graven image to deck the fulgent tomb of Poe, calm block here fallen from some unknown disaster, at least let this granite show the limit point of blasphemy's dark flights to be scattered hereafter. And another poet that I've been working on trying to translate, and again, it's a work in progress, and really specifically because I wanted to work on a poetry that I understood to be political and see what it would be like to sort of temporarily inhabit that poetry for myself, is the poetry of Franco Fortini. And he was a contemporary of Pasolini's, sometimes a friend, more often and finally irrevocably an opponent. And so far, I've only actually succeeded in arriving at one final translation to my satisfaction. And this is going to be coming out sometime in a magazine called Volt. And this poem is called Reality. The city I'm talking about does not exist. It's an idea of reason and of the will. Hoping to make myself understood, I call it by an unfamiliar name. Its avenues lead out into the void. Its groceries stay open late. There, your friends have made up names. Which of them is living? Which dead? Probably they are lapis lazuli scarabs in the museum, catalog entries, snapshots, exam honoraria. Or with a sob caught in their throat, they sleep the afternoon away. Yes, I once went to Gela. Another time I even passed through Roubaix. For several months I lived in Rome. That doesn't amount to much. To realize that in a brain as weary as mine, idealism still wins out, that's really something else. Typists cover up the calculators. Cats mind their own business. In the garage, they're cleaning carburetors. That's reality. If you drop your newspaper, it blows around and ends up in the hydrangeas. You don't want to give up on syntax. Fiction is your final hope. Someone phones and your voice registers anxiety. History, you go back to saying, is all the reality there is. But that's not so. You're just trying to buck up your courage. Reading gets hard. Domestic noises announce dinner time and give you a way out. There's a war movie at the Cristallo Cinema, a lively debate on TV. Duty, according to Schiller, lies in resistance. Dante insists on a challenging rhyme scheme. So you see why even friends have become just names. Why you dream of nothing but a hearse. Why you're talking about Turin does not mean there's a city by that name anywhere in the world. And even if there was, it wouldn't matter. You only use the plural to warn the children not to trip on the stairs. Everything's horrible, but not yet irreparable. And I'm going to take a chance and read a couple of unfinished translations of poems by Fortini. And what you should know is that aside from being a poet, he was very active as a translator from several languages, and also very active as a critic and polemicist. And these poems all somehow reflect those experiences. This one is called Translating Brecht. A massive thunderstorm swirled around the rooftops all afternoon, then broke in lightning flashes and floods. I eyed verses of concrete and glass with cries and wounds and limbs walled into them, my own included, and I've outlived them. Cautiously glancing now at the embattled roof tiles, now at the dry page, I heard the word of a poet die or suffer sea change into some other one, but not for us. The oppressed remain oppressed and calm. Calmly, the oppressors chat on the phone. Hatred has its courtesies. Even I think I no longer know who to blame. Right, I say to myself, hate those who sweetly lead toward nothingness, the men and women who walk with you and think they don't know. Among the enemy names, write also your own. The storm has vanished with its clatter. Nature is too weak to mimic battles. Poetry changes nothing, no guarantees, but write. This one is called For the Works of Isaac Babel. It was published in 1957, which was the year that Babel's stories were first republished in the Soviet Union, and it's dedicated to Ilya Ehrenberg, author of the preface. For the Works of Isaac Babel. If you don't know how to punish, if you don't know how to incinerate that part of yourself, that part of ourselves that stayed silent, if you don't know how to tell why we let Babel and the others die, and who within ourselves pressed shut for 20 years his mouth, then don't talk. Don't write prefaces. Don't gild those names out of pity. Leave us our imperfect, humbled truth between the revolution that's done and the one still to come. And one last one from Fortini, The Poet as Servant. I've taken up this effort as my load, and I'm carrying it. You who for 1,000 years have been carrying the world's evil and laugh it off and die from it, forgive my walking apart this way, my slowness and my lack of song. I'm the servant of too many masters. Out there, they spare no thought for me. They've no idea I've betrayed them. They have no idea they'll die before I do. And if I disappear, the hate, the ridicule, the deceit, their or my errors, will be these words of love, painless truths, air and freedom. And I'm going to finish with a few poems of my own, which are pretty new. And the other day I was reading in the New Yorker something about a novelist called Viet Thanh Nguyen. And he said that there are too many important things out there to write about, and people shouldn't write about moons and flowers. So of course I have a poem that's titled Moons and Flowers for Viet Thanh Nguyen. Autumn revisited, a time beyond recognition. They've already begun remembering me in the odors of a burnt out forest where keep talking to myself, but don't listen. You administer my creative deficiencies and ideas that touch only where they're broken. Sipping tea cooled with blood and cream, we start eye gazing. And paused, ghostly image, never stop. The preceding verse should be reduced in level, filtered slightly darker to make the transition clearer. Fire runs away up the hill singing. How far America lies from my heart. I spy the sublime of miniaturization in the pupil of an eye, where stormy skies welcome balmy weather. Your hard work only makes it worse. An eye is a moon in all its phases, and that tiniest reflection in it, is it just me? Or the roses I proffered with love and unnatural business, reassuring myself against the landscape, a music built just of chords that assail the world. In my final days of healing, use a rose as my microphone. Voir dire. Explain how the statue came down. Later, carried dripping to an undisclosed location. You can take pictures of all kinds of things, but the utterly beheld or unbeheld, a life too fast to keep up with. Disorienting like the blast of sunlight when you exit the darkness of a movie theater in the afternoon. You ask how we survive all this surviving with unlimited desire for freedom and a name that might have been onomatopoeia. An official divulged that there are no planned fixes. Snails and butterflies begin to emerge from a single-use epic written backward in the fog on a mirror, the all and more than all, sounded out with hesitation from the other side, an echo of someone's laughter in the beat of your heart. If love has but a single face, your noticing is what makes it so. And I'll finish with this one, which is actually a poem that I finished yesterday. Wish me luck. Soundtrack for a Seascape. Breathing was never that easy. It said you once lived in water, according to a breathless calendar, as life on Earth comes to its glorious end. Timeless corridors of waves upon waves wonder why a certain sound is dealt a certain name. Homophony of longing for the moon, the left hand's exasperated resistance to the wind. The best notes are always unnecessary. Salt enters through the pores, the sun caught napping, and ocean disassembled. Its freezing point decreases as salt concentration increases. One last orgasm, please. Some regrets I never managed to feel. Flood tide makes its way toward the sky, drapes in fluid, a planet you won't know how to miss. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry. I loved hearing those translations and poems, and thank you so much for gathering us all, for making it possible, for this sharing to be possible. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here and also to read with Tyrone and Joyelle and Arthur. I'm going to start by reading an excerpt from Ferlinghetti's Populist Manifesto #2. I signal to you as Artaud signaled through the flames. I signal to you over the heads of the land, the hard heads that stand like menhirs above the land in every country, the short-haired hyenas who still rule everything. I signal to you from poets' land, you poets of the alienated breath, to take back your land again and the deep sea of the subjective. Have you heard the sound of the ocean lately, the sound by which daily the stars still are driven, the sound by which nightly the stars retake their sky? The sea thunders still to remind you of the thunder in the blood, to remind you of yourselves. Think now of yourself as of a distant ship. Think now of your beloved, of the eyes of your beloved, whoever is most beloved, he who held you hard in the dark, or she who washed her hair by the waterfall, whoever makes the heart pound, the blood pound. Listen, says the river. Listen, says the sea within you. You with your private visions of another reality, a separate reality. Listen and study the charts of time. Read the Sanskrit of ants in the sand. And in addition to reading something by Ferlinghetti, I also wanted to read something by Cesar Viejo. And he's a Peruvian poet, as I'm sure you all know, and he was a political activist his whole life, a Marxist, and ended up spending a lot of his time between France and Spain. And so the poem I'm going to read is an excerpt from a longer poem he wrote about a year before his death, and the Spanish Civil War was still raging. And actually, as a way to frame that poem, I thought I would read just a tiny excerpt from an article that he wrote, because he thought a lot about the relationship between art and politics. And he has one article in which he says, and I'll read it, "The artist isn't circumscribed to cultivating new vegetation in the field of politics, or to geologically modifying that field, but chemically and naturally he must transform it." And so I was curious to read what I'm about to read with that characterization in mind, of this idea of a kind of of chemical transformation. And so the poem is a section from a long poem or longer poem called Poem to be Read and Sung. And of course, this is all in translation from the Spanish. This, and it's the translator is Joseph Mulligan. The peace, the wasp, the shoe heel, the slopes, the dead one, the desolators, the owl, the places, the ringworm, the sarcophagi, the glass, the brunettes, the ignorance, the cattle, the altar boy, the drops, the oblivion, the potentate, the cousins, the archangels, the needle, the priests, the ebony, the rebuff, the part, the type, the stupor, the soul, flexible, saffroned, eternal, neat, portable, old, 13, blood smeared, those photographed, ready to messent, those linked, long, beribboned, perfidious, burning, comparing, living, raging, striking, analyzing, hearing, shuddering, dying, standing firm, succeeding, weeping. After, these, here, after, above, perhaps, while, behind, so much, so never, below, by chance, distant, always, that one, tomorrow, how much, how much. The horrible, the sumptuous, the slowest, the august, the fruitless, the ominous, the convulsive, the wet, the fatal, the whole, the purest, the lugubrious, the bitter, the satanic, the tactile, the profound. And that's the Viejo. And so to finish, I just wanted to read a little from my book, which Barry mentioned. It's called Days, and came out with it's coming out, it's out this year with Belladonna. It's a book-length poem with 108 7-line interlinking stanzas, or they can alternately be thought of as poems. Each stanza poem has its own page, and it's all phrases, fragments gathered together, separated by commas, there is a period at the end. But so I'm going to read from about midway through, and this moment is, I was commuting at the time to teach at a liberal arts school in New Jersey and taking the Greyhound bus, and I just gathered all of the signs that I was looking at out the window and what I saw around me. And then the poem goes on a little after that. But I'm actually going to share my screen because the text is quite a visual one, so I thought it would be nice to share it while I read. So I'm going to do that. Okay. So because it's an ongoing interlinking set of stanzas, poems, it begins mid-sentence, where I'm going to read. Has only partially emerged from where? On my way to work. If the whole of language were present to me when I spoke, then I would not be able to articulate anything at all. Trundling forward, being trundled, landscape of signs, Peter Pan, Port Authority, regular credit, regular cash, retail opportunity, Club Feather, Total Wine and More, J&Co Hair, Net Cost Market, Mantra, Bahama Breeze, Blick's Art Materials, Red Lobster, Smash Burger, Perfect Pawn, Metropolitan Plant and Flower Exchange, Yourit, Swing Sets, Light, Waves, Lighting, Once Upon a Child, Peter Crotty, FedEx Office, Pearl Art Tiger, Suburban Golf, Galaxy, Spirit, Concept, Emergency Exit, Push Window, T-Neck, Hertz, Shoes Capital, Globe, Nord, Paparazzi, Parking, No Stopping or Standing, F79 CWD, M57 ARU. Do not enter racetrack. Everybody's talking about the stormy weather. East, Coach, USA, Tiger Mart, Dermatology Next Right, Shop Dollar, IKEA, Open, Wells Fargo, Kmart, The Goods, EMS, Barnes & Noble, the Goodwill Store, Popeyes, Booksellers, Equinox, Guitar Center, Etopia, Saddle, River, No Turning, Signature Leather Furniture, Sale, Whole Foods, Key Food, Regal Foods, Breakfast, Pizza, Expert in Fertility Care, We Buy Ugly Houses, 212-744-4411, RX, Community Jackpots, Dentist, Natuzzi, West, Fairway, GNC Livewell, Lighting Superstore, Patio.com, All American Collision Center, Citibank, Toys R Us, Joss A. Bank Clothiers, T-Mobile, Spirit Desire, Spirit, Benjamin Moore, Fitness Equipment, Airsoft Tactical Sports Authority, Face Me, Staples, Superstore, The Vitamin Shop, DXL, Verizon, Babies R Us, America, Proud to be among America's best, Crate and Barrel, Aladdin Smoke Shop, Cartridge World, Desire, Miss Me, Petco, Sleepy's, Marburn Curtains, Value, We Will Full, Beal, AT&T, Lens Crafters, Supercenter, Dollar Tree, BJ's, DJ's Express Entertainment, Autobody, Luke Oil, Tiger Mart, Tile Shop, SEA, Fitness and Wellness, Home Depot, Exxon, Satin Dolls, Crystal Clear, Stop and Shop, Carvel, Chit Chat Diner, Friendlies, Spirit Desire, We Will Full, Fribble, Guaranteed Credit Approval, Hilton, BP, Bazaar, America's Finest Self-Storage, Fabric Outlet, Horizon, Porcelanosa, Olive Garden, Hardwood, Electric Car Wash, Extreme Care, The Bottle King, Hertz, Chili's, Chipotle, Visions Federal Credit Union, The Container Store, Wawa, Plumbing and Heating, Wayne Tile, Worth USA Inc., Doubletree, Cartridge World, Comfort Suites, Grand Buffet, Dick's Sporting Goods, Trader Joe's, Shake Shack, Best Buy, Party City, The Fireplace, Spirit Desire, We Will, Equinox, McDonald's, Starbucks, Ski Barn, Shell, Bell Aqua Inc., Quick Check, Extended Stay America, Uncle Giuseppe's Marketplace, State Line Diner, Mason Jar. That was my commute. What about progress? I had no clue. What of desire? It. Steamroll, full, feel euphoric, walk around a museum, stare at the white space. That gap grows into a lump. Later in the day, to conceal one act, spread on windows so I couldn't see out. In terms of intervals, they can be seen as rivers with logs drifting on them. What happens when enough of them float by? There it goes, or put another way, every time a person bumped into me, I felt either the equality or inequality of diameters. Pocket of distance, deep fleecy Uniqlo, relationship of distance to complicity, incipient flower, moral, the nucleus, like Wittgenstein talks about, the difference, or rather the interval, measure each other's intervals, this wad of interval made dense as an organ, aura of density, like a lung filling with water, interval. So that's what I'll read for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simone. That was wonderful. Passing the mic now to Arthur Z.
Thank you. I also want to say it's such a pleasure to be reading with Barry, Simone, Joyelle, and Tyrone. And I wanted to start just by sharing a short reminiscence of Lawrence Ferlinghetti. The one time I met him was at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado. And we had breakfast one morning, and I remember him talking about how all the beat poets were gone and he was the only one left, and he laughed and he said, people don't realize my rhythm of living. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And Lawrence said, well, in San Francisco, every morning I like to get up and swim laps, and ideally swim an entire mile of laps. And then when I walk over to City Lights bookstore and work on poems or do whatever, I carry that rhythm of swimming into language and into my day. And I've never forgotten that. I thought that was really beautiful. I'm going to read 5 poems. One is a translation, but I'm going to start with a few of my own poems. This first poem is called Fault Lines. He pours water into a cup. At room temperature, the cup is white. But after he microwaves it, and before steeping a tea bag with mint leaves, he notices outlines of shards have formed above the water. As the cup cools, the lines disappear. Now he glimpses fault lines inside himself, and feels a Siberian tiger pace along the bars of a cell. Black, orange, white. Black, orange, white. And feels how the repeating notes send waves through him. His eyes glisten, and he tries to dispel the crests. But what have I done? What can I do? Throbs in his arteries and veins. Today, he will handle plutonium at the lab and won't consider beryllium casings. He situates the past in the slight aroma of mint rising in the air. Sometimes he's an astronaut suspended above Earth, twisting on an umbilical cord. Sometimes he's in the crosshairs of a scope, and tiger stripes flow in waves across his body. This next poem is called Salt Song, and it's in the voice of Salt. Zunis make shrines on the way to a lake where I emerge, and Miwoks gather me out of pools along the Pacific. The cheetah thirsts for me, and when you sprinkle me on ribeye, you have no idea how I balance silence with thunder in crystal. You dream of butterfly hunting in Madagascar, spelunking through caves echoing with dripping stalactites. And you don't see how I yearn to shimmer in orange aurora against flame. Look at me in your hand. In Egypt, I scrubbed the bodies of kings and queens. In Pakistan, I zigzag upward through 26 miles of tunnels before drawing my first breath in sunlight. If you heat a kiln to 2,380 degrees and scatter me inside, I vaporize and bond with clay. In this unseen moment, a potter prays because my pattern is out of his hands. And when I touch your lips, you salivate. And when I dissolve on your tongue, your hair rises. Ozone unlocks. A single stroke of lightning sizzles to earth. This next poem is a translation I did of a Chinese poet named Yang Lian, who left China after Tiananmen and lived in various countries, settled in London for a number of years, and then moved to Berlin, and that's where he lives today. And this is a short poem of his called Memorial to a Tree at the Street Corner. And it's my translation of his recent poem. Last night, my poem moved to the street corner, enacted a tree, waved. Small white flowers that suddenly turned their faces like ghosts. Screaming on tiptoe permeated the air. Ankle bones sparkled like crystals. The Tang dynasty, like a lantern, suddenly switched on. Already, it's been so many years. Along a red brick wall, I turned a corner. It was the old country at Branch Tip. Familiar bloodshed finds again its stand-in, throws out tons of quicksilver colors. But I am no longer scared of shriveling, since a spring night washed away. At the tree stump, the lingering sound of an electric saw. This next poem, which is my own, is set on the Kona coast on the big island of Hawaii, and it's called Cloud Forest. Against the mountain slope, incoming fog. We stood near the maroon strips of bark and inhaled the aroma of a rainbow eucalyptus. In the Netherlands, a rising sea level is stressing dikes. And a kepa is singing. Waves were white capping against black lava rock. On an atoll, nuclear waste was dumped into a concrete vault. We find these truths to be self-evident. In a past life, I played the clarinet in a marching band. Now the vault has cracked. Have we not meandered, bewildered in a cloud forest? Along this coast, you are tracing the contours of desire. The pilot veers the helicopter up over the canyon rim as we gasp. The Amaui has vanished. We step into red ginger daylight. And this last poem is called Sightlines, and it's set in the Poaki Valley, about 20 miles north of Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I live. And if you walk in that valley, there are very old acequias or irrigation ditches that bring water off the rivers into farmlands and fields. And if you're walking in that valley and you look west up on one of the mesas, you can see Los Alamos, the birthplace of the atom bomb. And as an experiment in repetition, I decided to give myself the stricture to, I just asked myself what would happen if for each line, the following line picked up a word or words from the previous line. And sometimes, like in the word not, the word no might be picked up in the following line. And that includes the title. So there's a kind of line and circle to the form. Sight lines. I'm walking in sight of the Rio Nambe. Salt cedar rises through silt in an irrigation ditch. The snowpack in the Sangre de Cristos has already dwindled before spring. At least no fires erupt in the conifers above Los Alamos. The plutonium waste has been hauled to an underground site. A man who built plutonium triggers breeds horses now. No one could anticipate this distance from Monticello. Jefferson despised newspapers, but no one thing takes us out of ourselves. During the Cultural Revolution, a boy saw his mother shot in front of a firing squad. A woman detonates when a spam text triggers bombs strapped to her body. When I come to an upright circular steel lid, I step out of the ditch. I step out of the ditch, but step deeper into myself. I arrive at a space that no longer needs autumn or spring. I find ginseng where there is no ginseng, my talisman of desire. Though you are visiting Paris, you are here at my fingertips. Though I step back into the ditch, no whitening cloud dispels this world's mystery. The ditch ran before the year of the Louisiana Purchase. I'm walking on silt, glimpsing horses in the field, fielding the shapes of our bodies in white sand. Though parallel lines touch in the infinite is here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arthur. That was wonderful. Next, we will hear from Joyelle McSweeney. Joyelle, I'm passing you the mic.
Hi there. Well, this is just an intense pleasure to be part of this reading today. And I'm so honored to be brought in to Barry's curation, the generosity and expansiveness in kind of medium after medium that you think about Barry, and the translations were a thrill to hear. So thank you for making me part of this bouquet, this anthology. It's also a special thrill to read after Arthur. As I mentioned in the chat, I am a huge fan. I think among his many gifts, Arthur is a great poet of tempo and of pacing. And I am a breakneck poet. I cannot pace myself. And I heard, Arthur, I've only heard you read once and I have never forgotten it. It was a few decades ago. And I've never forgotten your pacing. So I was so delighted and I feel a little nuts right now to hear the last poem that really has that kind of tense, like I've never felt moderato feel so tense. Really, really moving and an exciting poem to be near. Woo! Okay, I'll try to collect myself though. To start with Ferlinghetti. When I think of Ferlinghetti, I think of the dedication page to Howell, which Ginsberg concludes, all these books are published in heaven. And maybe it's because I'm a publisher as well as a poet, but to me, that comment, that declaration of faith is a really amazing act of solidarity with the acts of writing, performance, and publication, that it's one kind of ecstatic act and that it's a callback to Blake, I feel, when Ginsberg writes that. And then kind of a looking, or kind of like a calling upwards into the ecstatic present tense of heaven that can break into everyday space through ecstatic experience. And that is the revolutionary power of ecstasy and performance and joy. So when I think of Ferlinghetti, that's what I think about. All these books are published in heaven. I'm going to read something of his and then I'll read something of mine. So this, for the Ferlinghetti, I'd like to just read the ending of his autobiography. Again, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about this until I'm speaking right now, but this is something that I heard him read in his famous performance, probably when I was a teenager. It might have been one of the only poetry performances I had even heard. I think it was just on NPR one night or something like that. And I never forgot his autobiography. And so I'm gonna just read the last page and a half of his autobiography. But I think it gets at a lot of his moves. So this isn't me, this is Ferlinghetti. I am a bank of song. I am a player piano in an abandoned casino on a seaside esplanade in a dense fog, still playing. I see a similarity between the laughing woman and myself. I have heard the sound of summer in the rain. I have seen girls on boardwalks have complicated sensations. I understand their hesitations. I am a gatherer of fruit. I have seen how kisses cause euphoria. I have risked enchantment. I have seen the Virgin in an apple tree at Chartres and St. Joan burned at the Bella Union. I have seen giraffes in jungle gyms, their necks like love wound around the iron circumstances of the world. I have seen the Venus Aphrodite armless in her drafty corridor. I have heard a siren sing at 1 Fifth Avenue. I have seen the white goddess dancing at the Rue de Beaux-Arts on the 14th of July, and the beautiful dame without mercy picking her nose in Chumley's. She did not speak English. She had yellow hair and a hoarse voice. I am leading a quiet life in Mike's Place every day, watching the pocket pool players, making the minestrone scene, wolfing the macaronis, and I have read somewhere the meaning of existence, yet have forgotten just exactly where. But I am the man, and I'll be there, and I may cause the lips of those who are asleep to speak, and I may make my notebooks into sheaves of grass, and I may write my own eponymous epitaph, instructing the horsemen to pass. That's kind of a hard act to follow, but follow it I shall. So my poem today is actually, I'm reading this poem. It's my newest poem, and it's a Coney Island poem. So that's like a double tribute to Ferlinghetti. And you'll know why in a minute. But the other inspiration for this poem is the painting that I'm standing in front of, which is Agony in the Garden by Andreas Mantegna. So in the Jesus story, here he is up here. This is the Garden of Gethsemane. So this is right after the Last Supper. Jesus knows someone's going to betray him. He knows who. So he goes into the garden to pray, and he leaves some of his crew here at the bottom to guard him. So Jesus goes to pray to God to see if there's like any way he can get out of this mess. He prays for the cup of trembling to pass. And he says, while I'm praying, I need you guys to stay up and keep watch. Don't go to sleep because the Romans are going to show up. Meanwhile, the apostles here at the bottom go to sleep. So that's what's happening during the agony in the garden. This guy is trying to contact the big boss, and these guys down at the bottom are sleeping when they're supposed to be keeping watch. So my agony of the garden is a little bit like that. It's a little bit about being the only one awake in a house while everyone is sleeping. And because I'm very modest, I'm the Jesus in this scenario. And the other thing that the poem uses is a repeton that was a tweet. So this tweet, to come back to politics, is from NYC Combined Sewers tweet, which lets you know, you New Yorkers, what's going on with your sewers. And that's a fantastic account to follow. Their tweet is, raw sewage runs down to Coney Island Creek. So that's the repeton in my poem, and that's the thing that keeps turning over. And there's nothing more political than sewage. So that's my contribution to the political part of this conversation. So the one last thing I'll say before I just launch into this one poem is I am going to try to pace myself. I am going to think of Arthur as my role model here. And this is a long poem, but in very short sections. And I'm going to make a little motion as I move between the sections. And hopefully that will remind me to take it easy, but we'll see. Not my strong suit. Agony in the garden. Maybe we should have some lubrication here before we begin. Agony in the garden. Beginning and ending with a tweet from NYC Combined Sewers. Raw sewage runs down to Coney Island Creek as the baby sleeps. A seraphim slips in through a slot in the zoetrope to learn what it's like to wink at the world from the inside. As ribbons of milk run down from the baby's hung open mouth to wreathe his hairline and dry there a lactic crown, the zoetrope turns on her axis for the umpteenth time tonight and all kinds of fraudulent shadows arise. Bad news, little dudes. Little badge on your baby breast identifies you as humans requiring oxygen. Galactic monsoons crow at creek rise. Raw sewage runs down to Coney Island Creek from a donor creek. And one bank leans on its sister bank and sighs. A revolver picks a slug from a sampler of blanks, lunar, ochre, sapphire, where Bellerophon's hoof stuck the rock, white, cheesy, fever, flowers flew out forever and raced like cats for the moon. As a cheese is named for its rind, so the daughter for her mother, the U for her dam, the fan for her fan cam, the wire for her splitter. So whatever arrives on 2 feet splits or shits in the river. Accept my prophecy. It's dangerous to sleep. When you twist the strings, you see the bird escape its cage, but it's stuffed back inside when you lay the toy aside. Creek bed, moon bed, dime, you turn on yourself, you turn on the security firm, silent alarm, dim night hums, a current converts the limestone lobby to a tank of green light. We look so good in the closed circuit. Let's knock this bank over forever. Crack the vault, go on vaulting way up in the sky. Everywhere we go, the glow of fame shall follow us like the smoke that rises from the vest stitched with blanks in the seam where we're shot apart. But no light breaks as good as they look tonight as their boss prays and the soldiers approach. Their cloaks ride up to show italicized hairy thighs. In this painting called Agony in the Garden by Andreas Mantegna. As fistfuls of ticker tape leap down to the street and run off to Coney Island Creek, the raw footage gives the path rooster something to cry about, and the siren that rides the cop car slumps in its reluctant crop of curls and cries. Lucid, illicit dust rides a moat beam down to nothing, where nothing lifts its white sheet to catch the image like a baby. Soon dawn will let one slutty ray slip through a slit in her robe, as if dawn could shoot vision like a burst of milk from the tit, as if dawn goes on minking and dribbling from the mouth of day all night. For vision is truly a bitch, and consciousness a toy, a zoetrope. Or day from the mouth of dawn spills, whose bleach blonde curls part like champagne from the mouth of Marie Antoinette, falls open as she sleeps. Who staged it that way? Built an Alp for the sun to come up upon, like a shepherdess, she, that blonde kind of sleep. When the nurse rinses the baby's hair, I'm struck as by a bullet train or beam. Milk runs from the rock of my breast. Champagne runs down the creek of the sink. The secret lies in Coney Island Creek. You'll learn the true cost when the bill arrives. Congratulations on your destruction, you with your mouth full of sand and samphire stuck in the ruts of your teeth. Trash blows from the mouth of the cave, smoking more a hole there in the lapel of the rose, her mouth slipping open, her mouth, a mouth for ghosts, girth of snow unloosed from its storehouse. The snowplow keeps coming by, lowering its tusks, waking the baby up. Well, let it, why don't you? It's still a union job. This blender has no dimmer, only on-off. I learned scripture from the bleachers, peering into my debts on a TV above a bar in Pennsylvania. For Mantegna loved mankind enough to paint them at the most awkward angles and still let them look pretty hot. Fixed like a punk's bangs in egg tempera, so much attention lavished in such strange directions. Who nuzzled the muzzle? Who set the rooster's egg rolling down the slot of a bad day? Who hobbled by on trotters the day you learned the name of all the beasts? Derecho, sinister, tributary, bursary. The backdrop is serene, while the lit up proscenium arch collapses like a bank. Wind comes tumbling down the hole. Wind winds back into it. On windy nights, the reception goes out in the middle of the game. Static supplies the crowd sound. Raw sewage runs down to Coney Island Creek. Snow spikes the football and pelts the earth with love. I greet you from the middle of a shitty relationship, or maybe slightly nearer to the end, though I am looking good through the hole in your foot, up at the dog of you, laid out in the bed. Like the dog I am, a dog at the deposition. A place to hide, with a hole in the wall for your money and your hospital gown and collapsing oak leaf crown, you nincompoop, the microscopic herbivory in the gut, snowmill of consciousness, capacious winding sheet, requiring extraction, takes exception to the puzzling pharmacopoeia sewn into the ground. With blue, black stitches, like the coroner or the psychopath sews up your eyes. Anywhere I strike, I rest my case. Gladiator sandals come back into vogue. Raw sewage runs down to Coney Island Creek, and everything rises on its bilge. Jubilation turns out to be awful. Who will answer for this? Who seeded the cosmos with iron so I could be born and turn to watch you go under as I am pulled up out of the tank? I scatter my notes on a galax that has more irony than just ice, the hand that falls open or closes in sleep. It is a SARS tumbrel, a rooster's egg loaded with spores, its tumbling hair in the mare's next galaxy, an omen and a prodigy brought low now to earth. Release her. Cartwheeling across the sky. An electrified cat on a billboard bestride the sideshow with her black tail on fire and her claws in the muck. Let curl from her mouth a curl of light from a locket, booster rocket or shot in the thigh. Shoot it up and let it fall back in the sky. Go thick and viscid down dark channels where the light has gone, and it's gone all night. The wind is in the wire. Baby's watching TV. Raw sewage runs down to Coney Island Creek.
Thank you so much, Joyelle. That was incredible. Our last poet of the day is Tyrone Williams, and I'm passing you the mic now.
Thanks, Emily. So as someone who has read with Joyelle and seen Joyelle perform, that was her taking it easy. I guarantee you. It's so wonderful to read here with Arthur and Simone. And thanks to Barry for asking me to join. So I'm just going to read, start by reading a little bit from Leslie Kaplan's Access, the Factory. It's a book-long poem in 9 circles. That's the division within the book. So I'm just going to read 1 page and then read something else. The street is open under the sky of the factory. Soft open street. The paving stones, all the same. The entrance gates are very high, splendid. Weightless carcass, disarticulated in full. Being there on the courtyard, it is there, the factory. Parts, scraps, and life, the factory. And brick and tile, and in and out, and right and left, and brick and tile, and soft and fat, and turn, and life, wood and nail, and iron, and in and out, and turn, and noise. Never a cry, the factory. Part scrapes in life, the factory. And iron, and life, and brick, and tile, and in, and out, and life, and nail, and nail. You don't know, you can't know. The short poem from Aishan Hutchison, the Afro-Caribbean British poet. I think this is from his book, House of Lords and Commons. The title of the poem is the first line in the poem. A furnace in my father's voice, I prayed for the cold stoves. A furnace in my father's voice, I prayed for the cold stoves, roses. A cruise ship lit like a castle on fire. In the harbor we never walked, father and son. Father drilling down, the fern hell his shanty shone, where inside, in my head, the lamp was the lamp. The market, the park, the library, not a soul but grandmother's morning wash lifting toward heaven. The barrister's son, and punished my sister. I stared at my head in a book. The horizon declined in my mouth. My little earth shaker, visored in placenta, wonder of wonders, tremulous in amniotic shield, ensouled already. Father in the veritable night, without house or harbor. Soon see in a voice will herald a scorpion's blaze in me, in the marrow. It's a very short poem. It's almost like a little parable, one of mine. Jobs for votes, jobs for folks. The boxer's jab, stick, carrot, stick, jams up the brawler, that no bob can't weave bumbling beast, his right roundhouse, his drop left, equals pay, a glancing blow, a jawline rocked, B staggers, rubbery, but still upright, as B collapses like a sack of shitty Little Caesars. So I'm gonna see if I can pull off this share screen thing. So I'm just going to show the, I think this will work. This is a collaboration between Raquel Salas Rivera and Erica Mena, Gringo Death coloring book. So I'm going to see if this will play. I don't think I need sound, so it's just a minute. I'll show that too. So here is this entire book, but I'm just going to read one page. It's going to be very short because the way this book is organized, there's a passage in English written at the top right-hand corner and a passage in Spanish written in the bottom left corner. So this is one page from that book. Hola, mi amor. An empty white box, a coffer, or a coffin. That's one page. I'm going to finish up with another passage from The Factory. And this is the first page. I can find it. Of the 9th circle. It's in a working class quarter, an old square, very beautiful. You drink a coffee at a table under the arcades. The lines of the facade are so simple, so harmonious, and a very old nostalgia grips your heart in the air. You sit, you drink. All around, the pink stones. The air is light, transparent, almost liquid. Up above the sky, rigid and blue, like a piece of cardboard. Music plays. Those were the days, my love. Ah, yes, those were the days. In the middle of the square, a fountain. Matter of the air, sound of the water. Weakness. Everything dissolves and begins again. You float. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tyrone. That was a beautiful reading, and thank you, Joyelle, thank you, Arthur, thank you, Simone, and thank you, Barry, all for reading today. It's been so wonderful to hear you all, and thank you, Barry, for bringing everyone together today. Thank you all who tuned in. We are celebrating the Rail's 20th anniversary this year, so please consider making a contribution to our anniversary fundraising campaign to keep the Rail and our special projects free, relevant, and independent, like our NSE conversation series and our special project, We the Immigrants. Every amount matters to us. Check out the chat for more information or ask one of our team. And please join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for Common Ground. And I will post more info in the chat as well. You all now can turn on your mics and say goodbye as you leave. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Tyrone.
you.
Thanks.
Thank
Many,
you.
many
Thanks,
thanks.
Arthur.
Thanks, Joyelle.
It was great.
Great reading. Great
Many
curation.
thanks. Many thanks.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you,
Amazing.
Tyrone, for the beautiful reading.
Love you
Thank
guys.
you.
So nurturing, you guys. So nurturing. Thank you, Barry, for putting it
Thanks,
together.
Sean.